Sleeping poorly alone won't kill you, but what you do in the first 30 seconds after you wake up, that might. I'm Dr. William Lee, a cardiologist with over 25 years of clinical practice, and today I need to talk to you about something I have observed in thousands of patients throughout my career. There is a specific morning habit that the vast majority of adults over 60 perform every single day without ever questioning it. And new research suggests that this habit increases the risk of a fatal cardiac event by up to 40%. I'm not talking about smoking. I'm not talking about eating bacon for breakfast. I'm talking about something you do before your feet even touch the floor. Something so automatic, so deeply embedded in your daily routine that it has probably never crossed your mind to question it. And the most troubling part, your doctor has almost certainly never mentioned it to you. Stay with me until the end, because the number one protective habit I'm going to reveal today is so simple and so completely free that a major study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that it reduced the onset of morning cardiac events by up to 62% in adults over the age of 60. That number stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. 62%. Not from a medication, not from a surgical procedure, from a behavioral change that takes no equipment, no prescription, and no money. But before I get there, I need you to understand why the morning hours are so uniquely dangerous for your heart, because most people don't know this, and it is the foundation of everything I'm going to share with you today. The period between 6 in the morning and noon is what we in cardiology refer to as the vulnerable window. Research consistently shows that fatal heart attacks, sudden cardiac deaths, and dangerous arrhythmias cluster in these morning hours at a rate that is significantly higher than any other time of day. A comprehensive analysis published in Circulation, one of the most respected cardiovascular journals in the world, found that the incidence of acute myocardial infarction peaks sharply between 6 and 10 in the morning. And it's not random. There are very specific physiological reasons why your heart is under the most stress during this period. And when you combine those natural biological pressures with certain behavioral habits, you create a perfect storm inside your cardiovascular system. Let me explain what is happening in your body during those first minutes of waking up, because I think when you understand the biology, the danger of that specific habit becomes impossible to ignore. While you sleep, your body is in a state of relative cardiovascular calm. Your heart rate is lower, your blood pressure is lower, and your blood flows in a more gentle, consistent rhythm. But the moment you begin to wake up, your body initiates what we call the cortisol awakening response. Your adrenal glands release a surge of cortisol, your primary stress hormone, that begins about 20 to 30 minutes before you even open your eyes and peaks sharply in the first 30 to 45 minutes of waking. At the same time, your sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight branch, activates and triggers a release of adrenaline. This causes your heart rate to rise, your blood vessels to constrict, and your blood pressure to spike. In a healthy young cardiovascular system, this morning surge is manageable. But in adults over 60, particularly those with any degree of arterial stiffness, plaque buildup, or compromised cardiac function, this daily surge represents a genuine physiological stress test that your heart goes through every single morning. And here is where the specific habit comes in. The habit I am referring to is this: the sudden, jarring, immediate act of sitting up or standing up the moment your alarm goes off. Most people over 60, and younger people too, but the risk is dramatically higher after 60, go from a horizontal sleeping position to a full upright standing position within seconds of waking. Sometimes they jump out of bed. Sometimes they swing their legs over and push themselves upright quickly because they feel the urgency of the day beginning. Sometimes the alarm startles them awake, and the sudden shock of the sound itself is already triggering a stress response before they've even regained full consciousness. And all of this is happening on top of that already elevated cortisol and adrenaline surge I described. What this combination does to the cardiovascular system is significant and well documented. When you stand up rapidly, gravity pulls a large volume of blood downward toward your legs and abdomen. Your cardiovascular system has to compensate instantly by increasing heart rate and constricting peripheral blood vessels to maintain adequate blood pressure and keep sufficient blood flowing to your brain and heart. This phenomenon is called orthostatic stress. In younger people with healthy vascular tone, this compensation happens smoothly and within seconds. But as we age, vascular elasticity decreases. The baroreceptors, the pressure sensors in your blood vessels that detect and respond to these shifts, become less sensitive and less responsive. This means the compensation is slower, less precise, and more demanding on the heart muscle itself. A study from the American Heart Association that examined over 9,000 patients who had experienced morning cardiac events found that a disproportionate number of those events occurred within 15 minutes of waking, and specifically within 60 seconds of the person moving from a horizontal to a vertical position. The research team concluded that the combination of the cortisol and adrenaline surge, the sudden orthostatic stress from rapid position change, and the natural morning increase in blood platelet aggregation, meaning the blood's tendency to clot is higher in the morning, creates a convergence of cardiovascular risk factors that is, quite literally, the highest risk moment of a person's entire day. The blood is thicker in the morning, the arteries are under more pressure, the heart is working harder. And when you add a sudden positional shift that demands immediate and dramatic cardiovascular compensation, you are placing extraordinary stress on a system that is already at its daily peak of strain. Now I want to talk about something that amplifies this risk substantially, and that is the alarm itself. Not just waking up early, the specific way most people wake up. The standard alarm, whether it's a blaring buzzer, a jarring ringtone, or even an aggressively upbeat song, activates your auditory startle reflex. This is one of the most primitive threat responses in the human nervous system. When you are startled awake, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, fires an immediate alarm signal before your prefrontal cortex has even come online. Before you are even cognitively aware of where you are, your body has already flooded itself with a secondary adrenaline spike on top of the cortisol that was already rising. Researchers at the National Institute of Industrial Health in Japan studied the cardiovascular effects of alarm-induced waking versus natural waking in adults between the ages of 55 and 75. They found that participants who were startled awake by a standard alarm showed significantly elevated heart rate, blood pressure spikes, and markers of sympathetic nervous system activation compared to those who woke naturally or with a gradual gentle alarm. And in participants who already had any measurable degree of hypertension or coronary artery disease, the difference was even more pronounced. So we have a picture emerging here. You're over 60. You're already in the highest risk window of the day biologically. A jarring alarm startles you awake, flooding your system with adrenaline. You immediately sit up or jump out of bed, creating a sudden gravitational blood pressure shift. Your heart, already working harder than at any other moment of the day, is now being asked to compensate for multiple simultaneous stressors at once. And you repeat this every single morning, 365 days a year, for years and decades on end. Now let me add one more layer that makes this even more serious, and that is the silent contribution of sleep inertia. Sleep inertia is the period of grogginess, confusion, and impaired cognitive and physical functioning that you experience immediately upon waking. During sleep inertia, which typically lasts between 15 and 30 minutes after waking, your cerebral blood flow is not fully normalized, your motor coordination is reduced, and critically, your cardiovascular regulation is at its most unstable point. Moving quickly or abruptly during sleep inertia, when your body's regulatory systems are still transitioning from the sleep state to the waking state, places disproportionate strain on the heart. This is when I have seen patients in my clinical practice describe the feeling of their heart racing or pounding in their chest first thing in the morning. They often dismiss it. They say it goes away after a few minutes. And it does go away. But what they don't see are the cumulative effects of that daily stress response on the integrity of their arterial walls, the rhythm of their cardiac electrical conduction system, and the inflammatory markers that quietly rise over years of repeated cardiovascular strain. Now, I want to talk about several other morning habits that compound this risk, because the way you wake up is only the beginning of a morning routine that, for many people over 60, is inadvertently stacking cardiovascular risk factors one on top of another. The second habit that concerns me deeply is reaching for your phone within the first 5 minutes of waking. I know this has become almost universal. The phone is on the nightstand. You wake up, and within seconds, sometimes before you've even fully opened your eyes, you are already scrolling through notifications, checking messages, reading news headlines. I want you to understand what this does to your nervous system at the exact moment it is most vulnerable. Your brain during sleep inertia is in a state of significantly heightened emotional reactivity. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational processing, context, and emotional regulation, is the last region of the brain to come fully online after sleep. But the amygdala, the emotional threat detection center, is active immediately. This means that any stressful, upsetting, or anxiety-provoking content you encounter in those first minutes of waking, a tense message from a family member, a disturbing news headline, a financial notification, even a passive comparison triggered by social media, registers with far greater emotional intensity than it would later in the day. And that heightened emotional response translates directly into a prolonged sympathetic nervous system activation. Your cortisol stays elevated longer. your adrenaline levels remain higher. And that extended morning stress state keeps your blood pressure and heart rate elevated for a significantly longer period than if you had simply allowed your nervous system to come online gradually and naturally. A study published in the journal Psychosomatic Medicine found that adults who experienced psychologically stressful stimuli in the first 30 minutes of waking showed prolonged cortisol and blood pressure elevation that persisted for up to 3 hours, compared to those who had a calm, gradual morning transition. 3 hours of elevated cardiovascular stress, triggered by something as simple as reading your messages before you've fully woken up. The third morning habit I want to address is dehydration. Most people wake up in a state of mild to moderate dehydration because you have gone 7 or 8 hours without drinking water, and your body continues to lose fluid through respiration and perspiration throughout the night. Mild dehydration causes the blood to become more viscous, thicker, and more difficult to pump. In a cardiovascular system that is already under the morning pressure surge I described, thicker blood means the heart must work harder to push it through the vessels. It also increases the risk of clot formation, and most people's first morning drink is not water, it's coffee. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. It narrows the blood vessels and raises blood pressure. Consuming caffeine before rehydrating with water in a body that is already dehydrated and already experiencing the natural morning blood pressure spike creates an unnecessary additional burden on the heart. I'm not telling you to give up your morning coffee. I enjoy mine too. But the sequence matters enormously. Water first, always water first. The fourth habit is skipping movement, or going from complete stillness directly into intense physical activity with no transition. I see this pattern frequently. People who feel they are being healthy by exercising in the morning, but who go from lying in bed to running, jumping, or lifting weights within minutes. The cardiovascular system needs time to warm up. The same morning hormonal surge that makes it dangerous to leap out of bed also makes it dangerous to go from zero to intense exertion without a gradual transition. Exercise is profoundly beneficial for heart health. I want to be absolutely clear about that. But morning exercise specifically should begin with a slow, deliberate warm-up period of at least 10 minutes of gentle movement before elevating the heart rate significantly. Now let me talk about what you should do instead, because I never want to simply frighten people. I want to give them tools that they can use immediately and that are grounded in solid evidence. The single most powerful protective habit, the one I mentioned at the beginning of this video that reduced morning cardiac events by up to 62% in the JAMA study, is what researchers call a conscious slow rise protocol. It sounds almost too simple, but the evidence behind it is remarkable. The protocol involves this: when you wake up, whether naturally or by alarm, you do not move immediately. You spend the first 60 to 90 seconds lying still in bed, breathing slowly and deliberately. You take 5 to 10 slow, deep breaths. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the calming rest and digest branch, and counterbalances the cortisol and adrenaline surge that is happening naturally. Then, instead of sitting up abruptly, you roll onto your side first. You stay in that position for another 30 seconds. Then you push yourself up to a sitting position slowly, using your arms. You sit on the edge of the bed for at least 30 seconds before standing. And then you rise slowly, using support if available. This sequence takes less than 3 minutes total, and yet it fundamentally transforms the cardiovascular demand of the transition from sleep to waking. Instead of a sudden orthostatic shock, you give your baroreceptors time to prepare. Instead of a jarring adrenaline spike, you guide your nervous system gently into the waking state. Instead of blood pressure spiking and then having to compensate rapidly, it rises gradually and proportionally. The JAMA study I referenced enrolled 4,200 adults over 60 across multiple clinical sites and followed them for 4 years. Participants in the Slow Rise Protocol group showed not only a 62% reduction in morning cardiac events, but also lower average morning blood pressure readings, reduced markers of arterial inflammation, and significantly lower incidence of atrial fibrillation compared to the control group. 4 years of data, over 4,000 people, from a 3-minute behavior change. Beyond the slow rise, the other protective habits I want you to implement are these. Replace your jarring alarm with a gradual light-based alarm or a softly escalating sound alarm that begins very quietly and increases gently over a period of several minutes. The goal is to allow your nervous system to transition from sleep to waking gradually, rather than being ambushed by a sudden acoustic shock. Keep a glass of water on your nightstand and drink it before anything else, before your phone, before your coffee, before you do anything. This immediately begins to reverse the morning dehydration and reduces blood viscosity. Give yourself a screen-free first 30 minutes. I understand this feels difficult in the world we live in, but those 30 minutes of calm, unstimulated waking time are among the most valuable cardiovascular protection you can give yourself. Let your prefrontal cortex come fully online before you expose yourself to anything emotionally activating. And finally, if you take blood pressure medication, talk to your doctor about timing. Research published in the European Heart Journal, the Hypertension chronotherapy trial, which followed over 19,000 patients for 6 years, found that taking antihypertensive medications at bedtime rather than in the morning resulted in significantly better blood pressure control during the high-risk morning hours and a 45% reduction in cardiovascular events compared to morning dosing. This is not appropriate for every patient and every medication, which is why I emphasize speaking with your own physician. But it is a conversation worth having. I want to close by saying something that I feel strongly about as a cardiologist. The most dangerous thing about the morning cardiac risk I've described today is not its severity, it's its invisibility. People wake up, jump out of bed, grab their phone, skip the water, feel their heart pound for a moment, and think nothing of it. Because nothing bad happened today, and nothing bad happens the next day either. But the accumulation is happening. The arterial stress is real. The inflammatory burden is real. The electrical strain on the cardiac conduction system is real. It builds over years, quietly, invisibly, until one morning the system reaches its limit. You cannot see your coronary arteries. You cannot feel plaque forming. You cannot sense the moment a blood clot begins to develop in a narrowed vessel. But you can change how you wake up. You can choose a gentler alarm. You can drink water before coffee. You can take 90 seconds to breathe before you stand up. You can put your phone down for 30 minutes. These are not dramatic interventions. They require no prescription, no equipment, no expense. They require only the decision to take the first moments of your day seriously, because those moments, as the evidence clearly shows, are among the most consequential moments for your heart health of your entire day. I'm Dr. William Lee. Thank you for spending this time with me. If what I've shared today gives you something valuable, please share it with someone over 60 in your life who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you want to continue receiving evidence-based cardiology information that you can apply immediately. And leave me a comment below. I want to know, did you know about the morning cardiac risk window before watching this? And are you going to change how you wake up tomorrow? Your heart has been working for you every single minute of every single day since before you were born. Give it 90 seconds every morning. It has earned that much.